Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa is a community partner specialist for the program, and he'll be here with us throughout the series. Well, John, aside from the obvious benefits that we talked about to the child on our first program, what benefits does effective early learning have as far as everybody else is concerned, the community?
Well, there's a tremendous benefit, and this is the subject that I often go out and talk to business groups about, Joe, is especially with our Kiwanis who are partners and Rotary and also business development folks, is for every dollar, for instance, for every dollar that we invest in quality early education, we actually are saving, as taxpayers, $7 in the costs that we are already paying for special education, public assistance, our correctional system, the cost of operating prisons, and lost taxes. Yeah. That's one of the long-term economic benefits from just investing that little bit. $1 is a $7 savings to both schools and communities. And that's very significant because it's almost shameful. And I'm not going to quote the exact figure, but it's very shameful when we invest so much more money to operate our prison system and what it costs us for per prisoner in the state of Pennsylvania versus what we're investing for our youngest and most promising children.
And I'm sure I wouldn't be going out on a limb and saying that probably most people who commit crimes had problems in school and maybe didn't go all the way through or weren't effective students.
Right. No, that's not the case necessarily all the time, but those we definitely.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was wrong.
No, well, let me clarify that.
Yeah.
There is definitely data. There's no question about that. The research is there that when a child was not really ready for school, then there are problems that develop down the road, and there's no question about it. A lot of that depends on the socioeconomic backgrounds, their parents, and those types of things. But we do know that we have risk levels that the state looks at. This isn't just Pennsylvania. This is all states that do this. And, Ocdel has a website. It's ocdelresearch.org. And we look at what's called Pennsylvania's Reach and Risk Report. It's done every year. And we look at a number of risk levels in each county and compare those risk levels for children under the age of 5 with state averages. And they're basically to find out how many children are actually and how many parents are taking advantage of quality early learning programs that are available in their communities, whether it's the Keystone Stars program, whether they're in Head Start, whether they're in early intervention, whether they're in the Pre-K Counts quality preschool program. And then we look at the other demographic factors of the area from the income levels, whether the children are from single-parent families, all those things. And then the state attaches a risk level from 1 to 5.
So this is for an area then, right?
For specific counties and also for school districts, for individual school districts. So then we look at those areas, and then when we see which areas really need the support, and we talk to businesses and school folks and say, hey, do you realize, do you know that these children in your community are some of the most vulnerable? Then we go and talk to them and we basically advocate for them in helping to support providing resources in any way, or becoming a partner in helping us reach these children.
Is one like the lowest risk and 5 would be the greatest risk?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, I have to ask you, and I don't know if you have them or not. Do you have stats on our
Yes.
area? And then also, just for sake of comparison, let's look at what would be a 1 and what would be a 5 elsewhere around the state.
Well, for instance, yes, and I won't go into the specifics of numbers because we have 22 counties and
right.
several school districts. But for instance, yes, there are in our area of central Pennsylvania or north central Pennsylvania. I will tell you that most of the counties, not all, but most of the counties are what would be considered moderate risk, some moderate to high risk.
Like a 2, 3, someplace in there?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and we have to look at the specifics. Okay.
Sure, yeah.
One of the things we're finding out, Joe, is that even though we talk about these great programs that we have statewide, only 38% of children statewide under the age of 5 are participating.
Even though
in them.
This is available.
Even though it's available.
And there's no cost to this,
And
right?
there's no cost to
Yeah.
it. So the question then becomes advocacy certainly is important to let communities and parents know.
Doing the show.
Letting them know about the resources and the programs that are out there. And then in some cases, access can be a problem. There may be isolated communities in more rural settings where maybe we don't have Keystone Stars providers in those areas. Well, you know what? Parents, in listening to this program and finding out more about these programs, maybe should go to their child care provider and if they're not participating, hey, well, I was wondering, why don't you participate? Wouldn't it be a good thing? I'd like to see my child involved in it. And then that's the one thing.
Or you can use some leverage and say, kind of, unless you do, I'm going to find someone else
right.
who does.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But sometimes, transportation could be a factor. There are a number of things. But that's the one thing is, and then, of course, some counties actually have higher participation than even the state level, which is certainly a good thing. And that means that those communities understand it. There's enough buy-in from those communities. But so the first thing from the business standpoint, we have to go and talk to people in the community to make them aware of what we're doing. And to once you talk to them about more of the economic benefit and why it matters to them, quality benefits everyone, okay? It helps create not only successful students, it helps create successful adults, and it helps create stronger communities. Because the bottom line is, we not only want our children ready for school, but when they get to school, we want them to be successful. We want them, if they choose to go to higher education, after they graduate from high school, whether it's a trade school or whatever, or pursue some type of employment, we want them to be successful and responsible adults. When they're responsible adults and they have the proper upbringing at an early age, they contribute back to their communities, and it makes communities stronger, and they contribute to the tax base.
Right.
So, the other long-term benefit, more people are working and paying taxes.
Right.
Parents who have access to reliable and affordable childcare are then able to work, and because they're working and their children are in quality early learning, the parents are 15% more likely to be employed. So, that's just that's part of it.
John, let me ask you this. What you said statewide, it's what, 38%?
38%.
Okay. How does that vary in terms of around here versus, we'll say, in a big city? Are we on the lower end of that, or?
Well, let's put it this way.
In your domain, in your region.
In our 22 counties, again, it can be. We're mostly around that state level in most counties. There are some where it's a little higher than that, but it's generally something that's being experienced across the state. Now, the one advantage when you live in a say like Erie, for instance, or Philadelphia, of course, or Pittsburgh, certainly in numbers, there are many, many more child care providers there. Yeah. There are more in a concentrated area that participate in STARS. So transportation wouldn't be as much of an issue. there would be more choice in terms of the availability of those programs. So that's number one. But surprisingly, there's still a number of folks who, for whatever reason, do not have their children enrolled in those programs.
I want to relate a story. When I first came to Du Bois, which is now over 20 years ago, I was on a community committee that was addressing the problems of young people, and we were referring to a survey that had been taken, and it showed an anti-education bias, especially regarding boys in this region, that people just didn't feel that education was all that important. Is that a factor in overcoming the low rate of participation that we're talking about? Is helping them to understand that it is important. Not only your kid goes to school when they're 5, hopefully not when they're 8, but that it's important now. I mean, do people understand that really at the gut level?
Well, I would be first of all, anyone who does not think that education is important, I would really question that highly. Education is important at all levels, no matter whether it's even in a preschool environment all the way up to higher ed. But the socioeconomic factor is definitely a factor, and that's no secret. How your parents were raised, how your grandparents raised them is so critical. And, we live in this, and you tend to experience it more in maybe rural areas. Maybe that's because, so much of our area is rural. But, in an economy where folks are struggling a little bit, there aren't maybe as much jobs. And of course, some of these parents see children who maybe went to school and whatever their chosen field was in college or whatever, still not able to find, a good quality job. That's disconcerting, certainly. But, that's a whole nother story, a whole nother subject. But you can't necessarily equate education. Everyone benefits from education.
Sure.
Regardless of what your chosen field was, we all are better for it. And I don't think that any child should not encourage their child to pursue education in some way, shape, or form. It just depends on the avenue that they want to take.
Well, if you think about it now, more than, we'll say, 20, 30 years ago, education is more important because 20, 30 years ago, you had the blue-collar jobs that pretty much have gone away. You get out of high school at 18, you go to work for a company for the next 40 years. Those industrial jobs, by and large, are gone or going. So education, so you can get a better kind of a job, certainly more important. Your title, Community Partner Specialist. Okay, who are you attempting to partner with?
Well, okay, I'll. That's kind of like an interesting. There's a lot of different hats that I wear, Joe. First of all, the folks that I'm really partnering with or attempting to partner with and throughout these 22 counties, first and foremost is business folks. I'm trying to spread the word about how important early learning is, not only to the community, but to the business person and to the tax base of the community for a future. Children are the future. And until we absolutely see that and recognize that, as we all get older and we one time look at retirement, we should all care about how our communities are going to be as we go down the road. And we certainly hope that we can have kids now who can stay in the area, or if they go away to school, come back and be contributing to the tax base and be contributors to giving back to their community. But that's the business folks I try to work with. Also, we have throughout the state what's called Learn Groups, LEARN, and that stands for Local Educational and Resource Networks. And these are groups of folks who work with children in all different facets. They can be school folks, they could be just parents, they could be service agencies that all work with children in some way, shape, or form. And these are groups that come together. They may have monthly meetings. They may meet bi-monthly. Maybe it's quarterly. And they plan events, outreach, things for children and parents to get the word out, to provide resources. And they're just a valuable part of the community. So I provide through the Northwest Regional Key in our 22 counties. I work with them. I provide them updates on what's going on statewide, resources that we can help and assist them. And that's another group that I work with. And schools, of course,
Sure.
critical. I sit on transition committees, which is the biggest part of my role with school districts in making sure that kids are ready to go to kindergarten. Not that I'm the one that's making
Right.
sure, but
Yeah.
but that's a critical point in their lives when kids are getting ready to transition from the preschool environment to school. So the smoother that transition is, the more that the child care community and the school districts can be on the same page and know those children a little bit better before they're ready to start school, the better that process is going to be. So getting off on the right start is so important. So yes, that's my role in terms of working with schools.
Listeners may recognize your voice and your name as a news reporter.
Yes, yeah.
So how did you become interested and involved in promoting early childhood learning?
Well, Joe, I'll tell you what.
Okay.
When I worked for years in broadcasting, initially I was in radio, and then I also worked in television as a news reporter, and then eventually I did some work in industry and PR. So I kind of worked in a lot of different facets. And when I relocated back to Western Pennsylvania, I used to work in the Philadelphia area, and I relocated back here. I started doing freelance work. I started writing wrote for the Courier Express and their newspapers, and Sunny 106 and some of the other
Sure.
stations covering
And you
news.
still do, yeah.
And I still do that.
Some of that,
I
yeah.
do very limited now, mainly school board and council meetings in Brookville and Brockway. But the number of contacts, I'll tell you what, being a reporter and the exposure that you get to people from all walks of life, learning about so many different things was so interesting to me. It opened up so many doors to me and piqued my interest in so many different areas that I started to learn more about programs, and became a grant writer. And I started working with Community Action in Clarion and Jefferson County. And that exposed me to a lot of child-serving and family-serving organizations. And through that, got me involved in working. I had a coworker who I used to work with at Community Action. She went to the Northwest Regional Key, and she got promoted, and her job opened up, and then I applied, and I started out as a STARS manager. So I had a territory. I live in Brookville,
Right.
and I had a territory of Jefferson, Clarion, Indiana, and Armstrong County. So I learned about the STARS program
From kind of the ground
from the
bottom
ground up.
Yeah.
So that really helped me. And then using my communications background and advocacy work, I thought it was really to my advantage to utilize some of the other skills I have to reach out to that type of audience and working with schools and businesses.
Now, a while back, you were talking about some other programs for preschoolers, and obviously we know about Head Start. You mentioned a couple others. What's the difference, we'll say, between Keystone Stars and Head Start and some
Okay.
of the other programs, either at the federal or state level?
Okay. Well, Keystone Stars works with all children, first of all, from infants up through school agers. Now, when I say school agers, those are folks, because in many child cares, school-age kids come either before they start school or they come immediately after school. And it's generally just strictly in the elementary years, so up until, through grade 6. Head Start has a program. Primarily Head Start is preschool kids, Okay, so they would be from age 3 and 4 and some 5-year-olds. There is a program called Early Head Start, where folks will go actually to families in their homes and work with the parents and work with those younger children, especially new parents, and help them in working with their children. But Head Start primarily is, for the most part, is a federally funded program. It's been around for years. It's a fantastic program.
Is that also not at the poverty level?
Well, yes, to qualify for Head Start, you have to, your household income has to be within a certain level to qualify for your children to be in Head Start. Also, in a different context, for people to qualify to have part of their most of their child care costs paid for, even through if they participate in STARS or not. There's a program called Child Care Works, which families who would qualify for this subsidy go to their local Child Care Information Services office, and they fill out an application, and they would qualify, see if they qualify to help so that they could go to work and have their child care paid for, and then they would just pay a copay to that provider if they would qualify.
I wonder if most people know about that, because you hear so often people, especially single moms, saying, they'd like to have a better job, or they'd like to have a job, and the cost of child care is prohibitive.
Right. Most parents who definitely want to work and know that they have to work, that's number one, who will meet those requirements would qualify. Okay, and so I'll tell you what, there's a huge demand for Child Care Works subsidies, and often in the past there have been waiting lists. Okay, so there's only so much funding that the state can provide for that. And it's opened up in recent years, which I'm very, very happy about, because the state understands the importance. And of course, all these things I've talked about with parents going back to work and the savings and so forth, that is very, very critical. We've lessened up those wait lists. So depending upon the county, it's much better than it was.
Is there a clearinghouse where people can find out about these various options? I know you've given me a website where people have questions. Would this be where they could find
Actually, anyone that's going to listen to our program and wants to call in a question, we established an email site. It's questions@nwirkey.org. Now, that stands for Northwest Institute of Research, and KEY is obviously the shortened version for Keystone Star. So it's questions@nwirkey.org. So anyone that has a question after listening to the program is welcome to send them in. And, this is only our second program, Joe, and we haven't had guests, but in the future we're going to have guests in most of our programs.
Right, and that was my final question. You're saying programs in the plural, and what are some of the topics we'll be discussing in the upcoming programs?
Well, for instance, in the next programs in October, and this is great because our first guest will be during the month of October, for which we celebrate PA Promise for Children Month. We're going to have 2 librarians who work with children on literacy, and Leslie Swope, who is the librarian in St. Mary's, and Darlene Marshall, the librarian at the Mengel Library in Brockway.
Know Darlene very well.
They will both be on the program.
Great. Okay, thanks, John. That's our program for today, and we will be back in 2 weeks at this same time with those aforementioned guests. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. That's papromiseforchildren.com. For John Posa and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.